Hi, Cliff Sewell again. Welcome again to the Magical Mindset podcast. Today, we've got a guest who I've known for a number of years. It's going to be all about, there's a lot of business talk in this one, but business talk around people and around who you are and how we've got to work hard. And it really brings to life that success doesn't happen, because this gentleman has been super successful.
I didn't see myself being an accountant. I wanted to be in business and helping to run businesses and be successful in businesses. Yeah, so I wasn't that confident, but I worked hard. So what I lacked in confidence, I made up in effort and discipline. And they would always say to me, "You don't let it get in the way, do you?" I said, "No, I've got time, too busy, enjoy life too much, move on." And there's so many environments and situations you can put yourself into to get away from it, or I've been able to, that it doesn't impact me.
Today, my guest is Peter Ahye. I have to confess straight away, we've known each other a lot of years.
Yep.
From my old previous recruitment professional background and whatever, but we've certainly stayed in touch. So I have a very set agenda of why I wanted you on the podcast, and we'll talk about it. But I want to make the point of, when I rang you and I said I wanted to come on, we'll talk about a very, very successful business career, very diverse business career. And I know lots of successful business people through my recruitment background. But there are a few people who really stand out for me, not because you gave me business, not because we always communicated, but the level of respect you always showed me as a recruiter, and therefore as a human. And as a business leader, that was something I always will remember. And if you're going to do that to me, one can only assume you're doing that across all other parts of your business and business life. So that was really important to me. So that's one of the reasons that I wanted to get that out as we talk. But as we do with everybody, let's talk about you first of all. We don't want this to be a business podcast. We want it to be about Peter. We'll talk about business. Let's talk about childhood. Let's talk about where you all came from, or the upbringing of what created who you are today.
Thanks, Cliff, and thanks for those kind words. And yeah, I'm sure we'll come back on to the why I treated you and others like that. Let's get going on that, actually. I was born in London, and when I was 5 years old, my parents, who were from the Caribbean, went back to Trinidad. My mum was from Carriacou, my dad was from Trinidad. And so I grew up in that environment, in a family environment, very close environment. My mum was very religious, not overly so, but we did have to go to church every Sunday and so on. And there was something about structure and discipline and respect that was instilled in me as a child. But I also think you're born with some of these things. I don't think that this is all about your environment. So I think the person that you are shapes you as well. Mm-hmm. And so if I fast track to my business career, well, if I've got a choice of
I am going to. Sorry. No, my job's to right, because there was a load of things you said.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so let's go back to the start. So both your parents were from the Caribbean.
Yep.
And did I misunderstand you? But they went back to the Caribbean.
Yeah. So they were part of the generation that came over.
Yeah.
To live in the UK. They found it tough. They met all the signs of no vacancy, growing up in London, or living in London. I'm pleased to report that I've never really experienced that. But so my dad was half Chinese, half Spanish. My mum was West Indian and Scottish. So
right.
I'm a real melting pot of an individual. But I really like that. I like that context and so on. So we went back, and my mum was one of 12. My dad was one of either 8 or 9.
Right.
We're still finding out about siblings as we get older.
That's a different conversation.
Different conversation. But so big families, lots of interaction. And the thing that always brought us together, and I remember this, and this has influenced my life as well a lot. My grandfather was a very, very good chef. He was the cook in the house. My dad was a really, really good cook. And I learnt from my dad. So my mum says that when I was 4, I was in the kitchen frying the first egg.
Right.
as a child, and I've never left the kitchen. And I love cooking, so it's influenced me a lot as well.
So there's a couple of things you say. So from that, we take the, that early childhood and was all about family and being close together. But then you said something that interests me, that it's not just about the upbringing, and it's about what's inside as well. I Whatever challenges I've had, I always believe there's good in everybody. I know that's a really big statement, and I know that people will challenge that all day long. But how much of, so, and we'll talk about you being an accountant, so we're not going to look for percentages here. How much of it do you think of where you've ended up today is your upbringing, and how much is it the DNA of who you are?
Well, that would be hard to put a figure on it,
Right.
but I can't help but feel that there's, and the reason I say that is I'm one of 4 siblings.
Right.
And we're all very different, and we've handled this whole situation of how we treat people and interact with people very differently. So there's got to be, and we grew up in the same environment. So there's got to be something about the individual, and within their makeup, and the environment that they grow up in. So, but I don't know what the split would be.
You talked about which is a pick. I don't want to dwell on it, but you mentioned it, that your parents came over and they had all sorts of the challenges with regard to discrimination and racism. And
Yeah.
whatnot. You have not found that.
I have, and I think this will tell you a lot about me. I am a glass half full person. I am the person that, when I changed my career, and I know we'll probably come back to some of this, but when I decided to set up my own business, kept looking in the rearview mirror. I was driving on the motorway, and suddenly I said to myself, stop looking in the rearview mirror. Yeah, the future's in front of you. The windscreen, there's a reason on a car the windscreen's bigger than the rearview mirror, right? So I'm that sort of person, okay? And so I've never really seen overtly, but I've heard, and I'm happy to mention this one. I was out with a former partner. I trained in Leeds at Price Waterhouse. I was out with a former partner, and I was told this also by the guy that recruited me into Price Waterhouse many years ago. And they said to me that when I was first spotted by the office senior partner in the office, he said to them, "So are we recruiting black people now?" And
I'm
I
cringing
didn't,
inside, outside.
but listen, Cliff, I could get hung up about that. I can let that influence me I think, to the detriment. My job is not to get hung up about stuff like that, is to find that way of tackling it and moving forward, and sharing with people the person that I am, that's what they get to deal with, not the colour of my skin and so on. And it's never influenced me. There's a number of people I could point to throughout my life that I've been very close to, and they would always say to me, "You don't let it get in the way, do you?" I said, "No. I've got time, too busy, enjoy life too much, move on." And there's so many environments and situations you can put yourself into to get away from it, or I've been able to, that it doesn't impact me.
And would you say that to anybody, whether it be culture or whatever? You just stop worrying about what other people may say or think. Just be you and get on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you've got to.
Yeah.
I think you've got to. Yeah.
You came through school. So going through schooling, I know, because I know the story, you ended up qualifying as an accountant.
Yeah.
Was that the plan? You were going to be an accountant?
Yeah. So again, back to Trinidad. Trinidad was, and when I looked at your ability to choose, in that defining O level, I think it's year 11 now.
Yeah.
But when I could choose, I was rubbish at sciences. I mean, I just literally hated everything to do with biology and chemistry and so on. But I could do accounts and commerce and business. I could choose those and do those as O levels. I loved it, and I fell into it straight away, and it was a natural fit for me. So when I came back to England, I was 16, went into a whole different syllabus, back into the UK system. No accounts, no commerce, no nothing. It was a real struggle for me. But accountancy was always something. So when I went on to university, I read economics and accounting, and that was always something that I just enjoyed. It kind of came naturally, particularly the accounting side, the business side of things. It just, my brain clicked. So So there was always a natural path. And I was one of the lucky ones going through university that by the end of my second year, I had been offered an unconditional place at Pricewaterhouse. And all of my friends were doing, it was called the milk round at the time. They were doing the milk round and trying to figure out what they wanted to do and going along to these interviews. And I remember sitting there going, don't need to do any of that. And I was really lucky. Really
Is that lucky, or is that, could we go back? Is that the upbringing, the personality, the energy you maybe showed people?
Do you know what? I think there's a little bit of.
We'll
talk about this, and we use the lucky bit. Right place, right time. Is it the same thing? I don't know. But the fact is, there was a profession that I really liked. I engaged really well with Pricewaterhouse. They were they used to do tutorials at the university as well. So I knew some of the team there. They got to know me. I happened to be the captain of the first team, university first team, for 2 years. So again, you know, I had a bit
Captain
of profile.
First team in
cricket.
In cricket,
yeah.
Right.
So I had a bit of profile at university. And yeah, we played against Pricewaterhouse, and they met me and met them outside of cricket and so on, and they decided they wanted me to be part of the team. Obviously not the office senior managing partner, but the others that were responsible for selection of people wanted me as part of their team, and they made that happen really quickly. So I didn't even interview with Arthur Anderson in the day, or what's now Ernst Young and these guys. I didn't go and see any of those people. It was straight in.
University. So you were successful at university. Then you went to Pricewaterhouse.
Yeah.
At that point, where did you see the career going?
I knew at a fairly early age that being an accountant, in the strictest definition of the word, wasn't where I wanted to be. I like to improve performance. I like to deal with problems. I like to problem solve. And whilst auditing gave you some of that, it was very limited. You know, it's quite formulaic and what you had to do. And yes, you had to ask good questions and stuff like that. But I didn't see myself being an accountant. I wanted to be in business and helping to run businesses and be successful in businesses. And that's kind of where I ended up I left Pricewaterhouse when I was 4, so about a year, 18 months post-qualification, and went straight into industry. And because I found myself going around audit clients like Panasonic at the time, and I wanted to talk to the people about the production line and, you know, why they've put this kit in and what's the payback and all that sort of stuff, not how much did it cost. And, you know, because that's important, but as an auditor, but it wasn't important for how I thought about business.
There'll be youngsters watching this, coming through university and try and work out what their plans are now. So I can't advise them from a professional perspective because I never went through university or whatever. But if a youngster, a bright youngster like yourself, driven youngster like yourself, and they're in university now, in 2025, would you, and they said, I'm thinking of accountancy and the Big Four, what would you say to them?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would still say absolutely. You know, I still stay in touch with the firms through my professional career. I deal with a number of the firms still. It gave you a real structure and a framework and a background, a bedrock to build on. I think it's a superb qualification. And I know there's always this battle between chartered accountants and non-chartered accountants and so on. The reality is it gave you a really structured environment. When you joined a firm of accountants, you knew what you were going to get. They knew what they wanted to do with you, and equally you knew what you'd get. And also with the bigger firms, it was like an extension from university, if I'm honest with you.
Right.
Yeah. At the time we joined, I think there was about 30 odd people joining, all graduates from different universities, all wanting to get on in life, but still have a good time at a weekend. So it's a great environment from that point of view. But the business skills, the exposure that you get, it's second to none. I've recruited a number of people that weren't chartered accountants, that came from different size companies and so on. and it's a little bit hit and miss in terms of the support they get, because they're very much left to their own devices, most of them.
Right.
Um,
So, because the point, yeah, and I think you've covered it, but I point that, as I say, youngsters will be watching who want to be entrepreneurs
yeah,
or have their own businesses, but not sure where to start. But that real core foundation of, look,
totally.
go and take the pain
Yeah,
of learning and building and getting that qualification. You would advise, yes, I know you want to be the next business leader, but that 3, 4, 5 years in accountancy.
I think it would really help them when they come out the other side. But we live in a very different world now.
Yep.
You know, the guys that want to get on and sell stuff from China and do stuff really quickly, make lots of money really quickly, that won't suit them. That's not, you know, the hardcore entrepreneur, if I call it that, won't want this structure, won't necessarily see the need for that sort of bedrock that I just described. But I think for people thinking more generally of going into businesses and not necessarily being an accountant for the rest of their careers, it will provide a great backdrop, because you don't just do accounting, right? You're doing tax, you're doing company law, you know, there's a lot that you do cover as part of that syllabus, and it holds you in good stead.
I think that's the point. There'll be lots of youngsters, maybe even not going through university or going through university, and all the advice will be, "Oh no, just go and be an entrepreneur and go and do this." Well, it's not that simple. Yep, some people do it, but it was. I think I was trying to get to the point of there is still a real benefit in getting that structured professional qualification and going through the pain of it.
I've met a number of people who have started businesses, and they always talk about they wish they knew, the lessons that they learnt. And these have been some expensive lessons that they've learnt. Okay. So, and when you listen to some of them, they are basic business disciplines. I've just been on a University of Leeds Business School Exceptional NED program course. And there were 2 accountants in the room. The rest of them were non-accountants. And some of the stuff that they covered on the syllabus was clearly relatively straightforward for us. You looked at the rest of the audience, and it was new stuff. And I'm thinking, you guys are pretty advanced in your careers, and you're hearing this for the first time. And it's really important
Yeah.
that you know what a P&L looks like, you know about cash flow, you know about the important things. So I do think get some grounding.
Mhm. Okay, let's talk about the career then.
Yep.
Tell us how it all evolved, and because I know you had a corporate career going up the ladder. Just tell us the high points, maybe some low points, what you learned, those
Yeah.
real learning curves.
I'd say when I left the profession, I made a good start. I joined a subsidiary of American Greetings, big American company that ran that manufactured greetings cards and Christmas paper and roll wrap and stuff like that. Had retail and manufacturing businesses, and I joined their UK operations on the manufacturing side. As a qualified accountant, I was able to make an impact really quickly.
Yeah.
There was a lot of ground that I could cover really quickly, and therefore, with some weekend work and some long hours, I kind of stood out in the crowd. Had teams of people reporting into me fairly early on, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that whole experience, that diverse team, and then within 12 months of being in that role, the controller of the retail business got seconded to the States, and I got promoted to become the FD of the retail operations. So, you talk about luck, you talk about, I was in the right place at the right time doing a good job. So I got the promotion, right? No questions asked. And so I made a really good start. I then,
Can I just pick up on something there? Because there are little things I love to hear, and then I hear lots of noise around
Yeah.
it. You said something almost without thinking what you said.
Right.
You said, I got a good start, and then you said long hours and weekend work.
Yeah.
You said, because that's you.
Yeah.
That's your background.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not criticizing people. There's a lot of talk nowadays of work-life balance. I get it. That opportunity came up right there at that point in your career. At that point and throughout your career, those long hours you did and that commitment you showed, is that little bit of luck you needed? Is that why you stood out?
Yeah. Yes, maybe so. But again, that's about taking pride in what you want to do, in wanting to be successful. I was really driven in the sense of I wanted to go up the ladder. Let me just go back a bit, because again, it comes back to my parents. So my parents were from a generation that didn't have a great deal, either of education or money or opportunity. They wanted their kids, desperately wanted their kids to do well. And I see that today in many other generations. You tend to see a lot of it in sort of some of the Indian families and so on that are pushing kids. I'm a governor at a school, and I've seen this this Nigerian kid making the progress, and his mother's so proud because you can see she didn't have the chance, and my parents were like that.
Right.
Okay. And they wanted you to really latch onto things. So with my own DNA and construct, for me, what that meant was I wanted to take advantage of those chances. And I also wanted more money. And I'm not going to, because I like the things that money can bring, the travel, the opportunities, and the more materialistic things, admittedly, but I wanted some of that as well. You have to put the effort in. Unless you're a royal family or inheriting a lot of money from somewhere, you've got to do it yourself. And I was happy to do it. I wasn't married, I didn't have kids, so I could do it. And I enjoyed doing it. But it's also an important part of my career, and why I think things have worked out. It's about getting ahead, in the sense of being ready for the questions, the difficult questions. When my FD came in on the Monday morning, I wanted to be ready to be able to talk to him about what he wanted to talk to me about, and not just, I'll come back to you. Yeah. And I always use that. I always talk about planning, getting ahead, thinking it through. I would say to people now, you said there might be some youngsters watching this. If you spent, because a lot of what I do, I consider to be common sense, right? If you spend most of the time upfront planning and thinking about what you want to do, and applying some real judgment and common sense to it, in most cases you're going to get 80% of the way. And that's without any great technical ability, just thinking it through, being practical. What if this didn't work? What if that didn't happen? And that's the person that I was. At work, I wanted to plan and get ahead. So I was always in a good position. I was always prepared, and I was happy to put the effort in.
You got that promotion to be FD.
Yeah.
And then tell us more. Keep telling us.
Yeah, so I got the FD. I loved.
But that'd be at quite a young age then.
Yeah, what was I? I was probably 25-ish, 27, something like that. 25, 27.
The number of people I talk to who have this ambition to be an FD or a director by the age of 30.
Yeah.
Is it something you look back at and go, yeah, I got there?
But I didn't. But that wasn't important to me.
Right.
Getting it at a certain age wasn't. I was, if we're going to have an open conversation, I wasn't the most confident, despite what you're seeing sat in front of you. I was not the most confident of people. I wasn't the brightest by some margin in my class. When I came over to England, there were some really bright kids. When I was trained as an accountant, I never went for the top quartile to look for results and my name. I always started off at the second quartile. Right. I just got in. There were just some super bright guys and ladies around me, and that's fine, right? So I kind of played within. So I wasn't very confident, I think, which might come as a bit of a surprise. So I think it's important for youngsters as well to have that level of confidence, and so I wasn't that confident, but I worked hard. So what I lacked in confidence, I made up in effort and discipline.
And then at that point, it's going. So you've gone into that role, and then I think we've talked about that wasn't the greatest career move for you there.
Yeah,
you had challenges there and you wanted to get out, because I know we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
Why did you need to get out of that? Why did you need to get out of there, and then what happened?
Yeah, no, so it was a difficult situation in this particular company. I agreed, not just in principle. We didn't have some small principle, there were quite fundamental things that they were doing that I didn't agree with. And so what do? You either try and break it from within, or you move on. And I chose to move on.
Yeah.
And I went to join an organization that I really loved working with. The guy that recruited me in, I had worked with previously. and there was lots to do,
Yeah.
and we did a good job in building out these businesses for them. Then the businesses were sold. We went through a sale process, sold the businesses, and we all, pretty much all of the senior management left because the company who were buying us, there was just a real sense of arrogance, and there was a real sense of we know better than you. So we said, okay.
Just picking up on that, because this is something I've heard and I still hear, and I see it shouted about on LinkedIn all the time. You've gone to a business,
Yeah.
you and your team have worked really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
An acquirer or a new level of leadership above you come in, and you fundamentally think they've got it wrong. Whatever, they've got it wrong. So you basically have to say, look, I'm out the door. You don't shout and scream about it. You don't rant about it. You don't blame them. You just said, no, that's me gone. And I think a lot of us need to do that more often.
Well, we were all the team that were running those businesses had done a good job. We had good careers to that point. We weren't worried about getting other jobs, and we all moved into bigger roles and got paid more money. So, there wasn't an issue of looking back and saying, well, wish we'd stayed. There's only so much you can do in these situations and change at that time that these transactions are happening and influence people. And it's something that I see even today in my consultancy. I just don't think we put enough time into really, really thinking about business priorities, business challenges, and the skill set needed to deliver that. And do we have all of that around the table? Quite often, companies just run with the management teams that were there. Yes, they do make changes and so on, but I see it all too often that they run and they try and shoehorn people into roles. Jenny's done a good job here, so Jenny can do the job, or John did a good job over there, we'll give John, without giving any consideration to what the job entails and whether John's got the skills or what support John might need to be successful. And then all of a sudden, I see all these people going from being good people to not so good people because it wasn't thought through properly. And I would say that's the same with this acquisition. They didn't spend the time to understand us and see what we could contribute. They just decided they could do a better job.
I want to go into that, and that's one of the key bits I think a lot of people can learn from here, because this podcast is all about people, but all people have to go to work and there are businesses.
Yeah.
So your business now, business consultancy, you will deal with a whole range of businesses. And one of the things I said to you that I want to talk about is that we're not going to talk about individuals. We'll certainly not name individuals, but this is for people who are running businesses, people who are talking about businesses. You will see the good and the bad, the successful and the not successful. When you deal with businesses now and you walk in somewhere, can you immediately see, oh my goodness me, or that's going to work? Give us some stories of really, really inspirational leaders and teams, or moments of, I could see this coming.
Yeah, so we're not going to name so some good ones. I've worked with whenever
you can name the good ones.
Oh,
if
can
you
I?
wish.
Okay, fine.
Yeah,
so
they'll
I
be quite
think
happy for you to do that.
I worked with Simon Wolfson at Next. I got called. I was working in one of their divisional businesses, and I got called down to Enderby because they wanted to set up an operation in India, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, would I go and set this operation up? And so that gave me some first-hand experience of working with Simon. And when I contrast Simon's working style, when I contrast his office with the office and the boardrooms that I walked into with a previous employer, chalk and cheese. Right. He was more my style. Top priorities on the whiteboard, there they were. Where was the focus going to be? What did we need to address, etc. So people can get behind that. And I then went on to use some of that in one of the biggest retail turnarounds that then happened in the UK subsequently. But Simon was his working style, his success that he continues to bring, because he's been doing that job now 25 years, I think, as CEO of Next. There was a lot to learn from Simon.
Was he fair? Was he hard? Was he soft? What was it about him? Because you speak very highly of him there, but can you?
I saw him, he was still relatively new
Mhm.
in his career. So let's describe it as a bit of an evolving style,
Right. Okay.
which, whilst I'm not close to him now, I see from a distance, and you can see that there's a level of maturity that's come with time. Was he fair? We were going through an MBO, and we thought it was very unfair when we were going through that MBO of part of the next group. But yeah, I mean, look, I've got to say that on balance, you know, leaders like that have to make tough decisions. Sometimes they got to be the ones that say, we're doing this and that's it. And as much as I would be interested in your opinion, this is what we're doing. Because ultimately they're on the hook for it, I guess. So they'll have different styles, but he was good. I also worked with a guy called Mark Newton-Jones over at it's now the Very Group. The Barclay brothers bought some very old distress home shopping businesses, really, really badly run businesses. You kind of think, how did these things get into this shape? And I was part of the team. Mark and myself went in to integrate those businesses and turn those businesses around. And I loved the early years of that. I loved the energy that came from figuring out what the problem was, determining what needed to be done, and then working with teams of people to execute and deliver some fantastic results. I turned up as group CFO. The business lost 200 million in its first year. I hasten to add that was already
That wasn't your fault.
the pipe had already been primed with that.
Right.
When I left, we made 150 million of EBITDA.
Right.
Substantial turnaround in what was a 4-year period of time.
How do you, it's probably an unfair question to ask. So that is phenomenal change. What were the key things you did? Was it around customer, product, people in the business? What could you highlight a number of key
So
things?
there were a number of things that needed to change.
Right.
The first thing, and there are a number of people that know this, that I'm going to take full credit for, was this same guy, Mark, was coming into my office every single day. And because we were the ones with all the energy and excitement and being paid to do this job, he was just adding stuff. I describe it, he was just adding stuff to my list, and this list was getting longer and longer. And after about 3 months, I just put my hand up, and I remember it was like sat with you. I just went, Mark, stop. And he went, what do you mean stop? I said, stop just coming in here and giving me things to do. Look at the list already. And I think this was the most crucial thing I then said to him. If I can't figure out what the priorities are on this list because you're just coming at me so fast, then what do you think's going on with the 30,000 employees out there? They won't have a clue. They will just be turning up and do it. And that was the catalyst for us going into the boardroom. I said, can we spend half a day in the boardroom and figure out what the priorities need to be? And then everything that we do from that point onward needs to sit in behind that. And if it doesn't sit in behind that list, and I know that sounds a little bit formulaic, but if it doesn't sit on that list, then we need to decide whether we're doing that now. We came up with what became the top 10 things that we need, because we said if we did these 10 things, we will have a successful business. One of the biggest joys in my career was going from minus 16 sales, 2.5 billion turnover group when I first turned up, to plus 0.3
Right.
18 months later. Honestly, it was like magical. Now, there were a whole bunch of things that needed to be done, and Mark was off with, working with the procurement, the buying teams and getting the ranges right, because that's where his real skill set was. He came from Next, he had an eye for fashion and detail and all that sort of stuff. There was a bunch of operational stuff, and I was in charge of all of the cost base that needed to be paid back. But ways of working and how we led our teams and so on. It was, I have to say, I look back on it with great fondness, that period of time, because we were able to identify and execute a turnaround plan. And, we look at a big green retailer not far from where we're sat, Cliff, and, they need a good dose of that now if they're going to have a chance of success. So.
Let's talk about because people are interested. Everybody's got a comment with a great deal of very little knowledge. Let's talk about retail and the high street as
Mhm.
such. You've been there,
Mhm.
you've been in amongst it at board level, and you've seen it. What I'm just going to talk about this country, I guess, or you may say globally. What's the future look like, high street retail wise?
We will always have a high street. Yeah, we will always have a high street. What's on that high street will change, and already we're seeing it. More and more experiences are coming through on the high street. People are trying to make it a reason to visit the high street. If we're talking specifically people that are selling clothing and footwear and so on, it's going to be tough. You know, we have a world now where I can sit at home on my phone, order stuff, get it delivered, doesn't fit, send it back. And it doesn't cost me a great deal to do that.
Right.
Um, so the dynamic has changed, and I think it's important. The main thing to do as a retailer now is to make sure that you understand your customer. So if I walked into their high street store, or if I shopped with them online, I should be one person. I shouldn't be this, separate people and treated differently or whatever. They should know who I am as a customer and what my preferences are and so on. And retail has been underinvested for many years. It's a tough sector, whether we're talking grocery retail or apparel and fashion and so on. It's a tough space. The margins have generally been thin. The ones that have done well have invested. Those that haven't done well haven't. But yeah, I think knowing me as a customer, the high street will be there. But it will always be. It won't necessarily be a sector that I'll be running back to, other than to help with turnarounds.
So I am going to put you on the spot again. I was in Leeds city centre
Mhm.
with my 14-year-old daughter the other day, and we ended up going to two very, very different shops for two very different reasons. We went to Primark and we went to Ralph Lauren.
Yeah.
You couldn't get two ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Now we were in Ralph Lauren because she's seen this particular jumper that we didn't buy, I'll point out, but it was a completely different environment. It was empty, and it was and I'm not criticizing Ralph Lauren because I think their clothes they're wonderful. It's a wonderful product, but there was very little in. And then you go to the I call it wonderful carnage of Primark. I don't know what the numbers are at Primark, but for me they seem to have got it right.
Yeah, so they're catering for the masses. If you look at the demographics that will then go and shop, so you will always have aspirational people that will walk into Ralph Lauren, as well as people with money.
Right.
Right. They've decided that's the sort of sector and space they want to operate in. Primark have decided they want value for their consumers, high footfall, yeah, low price point. Sadly, in some cases, not great quality, but you know, we live in a disposable world still. It is changing. There are, people are trying to change and recycle and upcycle and so on. But yeah, we've requested, and I say we, the consumer has requested a race to the bottom in terms of price, and that's what retailers have delivered for them, with the consequences of that, whether it be global warming, whether it be working conditions overseas for people. That's what we've asked for. We wanted our clothes cheap, so somebody found a solution for us. And that's what I'm afraid that's all some people can afford. Those are the facts. Those are the facts of life, right? People need something that suits their model. But before you said it was empty, I would have said, yeah, I bet there was nobody in there other than the.
And I'm saying I'm not. I love
and that's the case in many. I was in London last week, and I walked into a number of, because I always like to keep an eye on. Walked into a number of the high-end fashion shops. Nobody.
How do they survive?
I don't know. You tell me.
Right, okay, right. Well, we've not had that right.
No.
So there's a couple of other things. Before we move on, just about you. You built your business, but I know full well you had your own dessert business and created that.
Yeah.
Just tell us a little bit about that, because I was always fascinated by that.
Yeah. So again, this was the link back to wanting to do something in food. And I met someone who had started to make these sorts of dessert type products, non-dairy, vegan was still a tricky word to use to try and market a product with. Even back then, this is sort of what are we talking about now? 2016, 2017. But I saw an opportunity, and I saw an opportunity to take it and take it to the big retailers, and we sold it to. We got the product listed with the top 9 grocery retailers in the UK, which yeah, we were delighted with. So there were many things that went really well, but it was always a tough sector to crack
You took it from scratch
from scratch.
to success.
Build a factory. So went to see Tesco. So we were at a trade show. Samples, no factory, no manufacturing capability. These were made at Headingley in the test kitchens at Headingley. We made these products, took them to this trade show in London, and the grocers came around, and the buyers from Tesco, none of them who wear name badges, so you don't know where they're from, liked it and said, "Really, come and see us." And then they gave us their details, so we went to see them. Within 2 meetings, this is now August, September, in the year, Tesco said, "We'd like it on the shelf in March." I said, of course we'll do that. We had no factory. So I went to the main backer, and I said, financial backer, and I said, we need a facility, so I'll go find a second-hand facility. We'll find somebody. No. He wanted to buy a brand new building and fit it out, which we did. We turned it into a food factory, and product was on the shelf in the March. Within 6 months, we created a whole large-scale manufacturing environment for the business.
Lots of people out there want to create their own business, want to do this. There was a little bit of advice I think you gave there, that you've got this idea, you want to you create the samples, you go to this show.
Yeah.
Somebody comes up to you and says, and it's Tesco's.
Yeah.
We want it on the shelves. Honestly, did you flicker at any point thinking, how on earth are we going to do this? Or was it we're doing it?
No, it was a case we're doing it, but I think that's partly because I've worked in large corporates before. So I suspect that if I'd just grown up in a small business environment, I might have struggled with that question. But having worked in larger organizations and seen the art of the possible, there was no hesitation in that. And you just go figure it out and you make it happen. And so therefore you come back to working hours. We were working until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, making sure that the builders were doing what they were supposed to be doing on site, because it all had to happen. I was running around the UK and Europe buying manufacturing equipment to have it delivered to be commissioned. People thought, and probably were right, that I was bonkers at the time. And with hindsight, I wish we had done so the first bit, fine. The second, in terms of getting it listed. The second bit, in terms of where I had it manufactured, I think with hindsight, I wish we were able to start somewhere smaller. There was a significant capital cost outlay, and you'd therefore put a lot of risk into the business right up front. The dilemma we had, and that would have been fine if I was making steak and kidney pies or something like that. The issue that we had was it had to be made from nuts and non-dairy, and there were not many facilities in the UK that could accommodate that and guarantee that. And everyone I spoke to said, yeah, we could make it in here, but we'd have to put a alibi label on that says may contain dairy and may contain nuts, which kind of defeats the whole point, right? So we ended up building the factory, full back in of the guys, but it was a tough space, an evolving space, and even now, it's a difficult space. I was reading the other week that all the sort of the meat free and the vegan offerings, many of them are in decline now. Consumers, just aren't buying as much of it as people had hoped. So
we've talked career, we've talked business, lots of success, but let's come towards the end about you. You're a chap, you're a human.
Yeah.
We talked offline. You are just about to head away on a personal trip to Japan.
Yep.
A bit of your time. How have you managed your own mental health, your own stability you've worked hard. How have you kept yourself on the straight and narrow? How have you kept yourself in the family and kept everything right.
Have I?
Oh,
You see, and therein lies the question. I'm on a certain path. I do certain things. The trip to Japan, many will look at me and say, "Wow, that's fantastic." Many will look at me and say, "Wow, that's really selfish," because I have a wife and 2 children. I wanted to do this trip now. And I wanted to do it for more than 2 weeks or holiday time that that the kids could have off or my wife could have off. And I also know that there are things that I want to do in Japan, like be at the fish market at 3 o'clock in the morning, that nobody would be interested in my family, right? So yeah, it was just one of those decisions that, in talking to my wife, I said, look, I just want that time. Reconnect, think through everything, and just make sure everything's in a good place for the next 25 or so years that we've got ahead of us. But I love all the research that I've done, the planning that I'm so looking forward to it. It's going to be difficult. I don't want you to. It's going to be difficult. Already, I was dropping my daughter and son at school today, and already I can see, because we're on the countdown. 2 weeks tomorrow, I'm gone, and I can see it's going to affect her quite, because I've got a very close relationship with my daughter. But we'll find ways to stay in touch. We'll stay in touch. Yeah.
the other side of it, do you know what life looks like? Or is that what a lot of the trip's about?
I think part of the trip's about that. What next?
Mhm.
I love doing what I do. People say to me, "When are you going to retire?" I said, "What's that? What for?" I said, "Most of the people, sadly, that I know that have retired are playing golf, and I don't play golf, and I don't want to go hacking my way around a golf course." I really, really, really enjoy the phase of my career that I'm going through now, which is working with management teams in some very large corporates to figure out their problems and help them with solutions, which is what I do. So you go back to being an accountant. Yeah, I love that, and that's a good bedrock. What do I really do? I go and listen to them, simplify the message, because very often it's overcomplicated, and help them pull together plans or get resource together around them to help them deal with the key challenges and I love doing it, and I love to see the outcomes. A big client of mine down the road, been working with them for 6 years, and took them from what was a very significant time of change for them, all the way through to sale process, all the way through helping them with strategy, and now with some other projects that we continue to help with. And just to see how that evolves and improves that business gives me great pleasure. Yeah.
Business, career, you've been very successful. You've worked hard. You've worked really hard. Could you give one top 2, top 3 tips from you of what's made you successful, or what's enabled you to keep going?
I've got to start with, you've got to have a positive mindset. Yeah. There are tripwires everywhere you go. There's always something trying to catch you out. There's always difficult situations. You will sit in a boardroom or you'll sit in meetings with people that you don't like. You can't let that define you. That moment in time is too short term in the grand scheme of things. So I think being resilient in what might appear to be difficult situations. The second thing that I would say is plan ahead and think ahead. Don't just turn up. I know this is obvious. If you're going for a job interview, for goodness sakes, just don't turn up, right? If you're not prepared to do some thinking and some research and have some questions ready. I don't know how many interviews you've done where you've said anything else after the main interview's over and there's nothing. It's like a deadly silence, like the thought of nothing. So plan ahead would be important. And I think the other thing, and you touched on it very early on for me, you're generally going to be part of a team. Have a think about what you're going to bring and how you're going to get the best out of that team. Because if you get it right, it's a really, really great feeling if you get it right. Working with high performing teams and helping people out, watching people develop, supporting, coaching, etc., etc. So those would probably be the three things that I'd point to.
Wonderful. That's exactly what I wanted. That's talking business, but it's talking business from a human perspective, I think. And that was wonderful.
Great.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Peter.
you. You're welcome.
And enjoy Japan.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll hear about it.
I'm sure you will.
All the best.
Thanks, Cliff.
Peter. Thank you for listening to the Magical Mindset Podcast. Please subscribe, leave a review, share around your network. I'm Cliff Sewell. See you next time.